Joining us now from his office is Congressman Jim McDermott, a Democrat, I believe, right?
So far.
Okay, just want to make sure. Just want to lay all the cards on the table. Who do you believe in this? Whose disaster scenario do you believe?
Well, this whole thing is about the 2012 election. It has nothing to do with debt. It has nothing to do with cutting the budget. It has nothing to do with tax increase or anything else. It's simply Mitch McConnell's scheme to prevent Barack Obama from being reelected the second time. He's said it straight out, and he's done everything in the world to make the government totally ineffective in dealing with one problem after another. Now, this happens to be one where the Republicans are playing with dynamite. And you shouldn't let children play with dynamite in the playground. And that's really what's going on here. And Wall Street's getting upset. And even Mitch is getting a little uneasy about watching what's going on in the House of Representatives. But we'll get the debt limit raised. It has to be raised. And then we'll get on to trying to do the business of the country. But they simply don't want to have government. The goal of no government or little government, I mean, their real leader, their real president is Grover Norquist. He's the president of the Republican Party.
Americans for Tax Reform?
Yeah, and he believes that there's no problem with debt. It's a problem with the size of government. You got to get government.
Okay, but if this is, so everybody's going on the assumption then that this is all play acting, that the debt limit will be raised and all the bills will be paid. Is that the assumption down there?
I'm not sure what they're really thinking, because there has been no serious discussion except among 4 or 5 people up at the White House. There's been no discussion on the floor of the House about what's really going on.
So you haven't had panicked meetings with the Democratic caucus on, oh my God, what do we do? Whose check do we not send out?
No.
Nothing like that.
Nobody. I personally believe that the panic that's being created now is being created to make the president look bad. And it is not real. There is no one who believes that the Republicans will allow the market to crash and have us lose our bond rating from Moody's and Standard & Poor's and have our money be thought of as like Greek money.
Well, let me ask you this. As a Democrat, is there anything that you guys, as the tax and spenders of America, are willing to give up? Something that you would cut? Because as we all know, I think even the president has acknowledged that you project these current numbers ahead, and at some point you can't pay for everything, even if you keep raising the debt limit, unless you just print endless amounts of money. So there must be something that the Democratic side is willing to cut.
There is something called revenue. You may not have heard that talk recently, but there is a phenomenon called revenue. And with revenue, we could do an awful lot. So there's no question that there's waste and there's ways to save money. But you're not going to get money saved in this kind of a situation where people are going at 100 miles an hour and having no serious discussion. When they started talking about, let's change the CPI,
the Consumer Price Index,
yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And they said, let's go to chained CPI. Now, there isn't one person in Seattle. Well, there probably are 5 people in Seattle who know what chained CPI is. And here we're going to put it into effect. Every pension, every federal government program, we're going to use this new measure of the Consumer Price Index without having one single hearing in Washington, D.C. To me, that's just crazy. And I'm not going to agree to those kinds of things. I believe there's money to be saved in Medicare. I have no doubt about it. I know places to save money. But I don't think you're going to get it done like this. You're going to have people sit down and be rational and talk about it around the table like we used to do.
We're
all
talking
this stuff is coming out of nowhere now.
We're talking to Congressman Jim McDermott. Congressman, I guess the thing that I wonder about is, the debt ceiling has been raised 10 times in the last 10 years, and you're saying we may need to look to revenue, and we should wait until cooler heads prevail and then get serious about, balancing the budget or looking at spending. But when would we ever actually do that, other than at this point where push has finally come to shove to some degree?
Well, there's something called the end of the fiscal year. That comes on October 1st. And we're supposed to have a budget all put together, an appropriations bill, and we go through a process. We've gone through it every year I've been here. And the fact is that we have a process, but to tie the budget process to raising the debt limit that means that every time we have to raise the debt limit, we're going to get into this kind of a fight. This is setting a precedent that is very bad for the country. We'll be tied in knots whenever we have to raise the debt limit. We've raised it 100 times since it was brought in 1917, and it's simply always been a pro forma thing. You have to do it to pay, not for the future, but for the past.
Why do we have a debt limit?
There really is none. Most countries don't have one.
I mean, if we've raised it 100 times, why are we even pretending it's a real thing?
Well, there was a feeling, I think, when this was first put in around the First World War.
Yeah, that's the first
to finance the First World War. And when they borrowed money to go into the First World War, they felt that people should understand what the war was costing and so forth. And so it made sense at that point. But now we've raised it so many times since that it's unrelated to anything. And my feeling is that it is a meaningless thing we go through. We go through it. I don't know how many times I've been through this in the time I've been in government, but it means nothing. And we'll have to do it because we can't let our currency become worthless in the world.
So how are the Republicans supposed to ever get their way then? They would have to win, I guess, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then they could perform this budget cutting they want to do. Is that what you're saying? That's the way to do it?
Well, Dave, you have kind of jumped over one step here. There used to be a process in the United States, political process, called compromise. And now there is no compromise. It's always my way or the highway. And you either do it my way or I'm not going to do anything. Well, that isn't the way it operated for the last 100 years, and certainly not at any of the time I've been around. You always knew that you were going to get some of what you wanted, but not nearly all of what you wanted, and that you were going to have to ultimately sit down and discuss, now, what are our priorities as a country? We fired off our last mission to space last week. We no longer have a space program in this country. When we want to send stuff up to the national or to the space lab, we're going to have to go over to the Russians and say, would you guys please carry our groceries up there for us? And when the Chinese put somebody on the moon here in about a year or so, we're going to say to ourselves, how did that happen? Where's our space program? What are we doing? Well, those priorities need to be argued in the Congress among rational people, not people running around saying we can run over the cliff and it won't make any difference. I mean, that's just silly.
Well, I mean, the path we've chosen to lead in everything has become incredibly costly. Maybe it's time just to let the Chinese and the Russians lead for a while. Maybe that's what the Republicans are saying here. We've had our run, and now it's time for us to cut back and let somebody else take up the burden.
Well, okay, if that's what you're deciding, let's decide it, logically and right out in the open. Let people understand this is what we've decided. We don't care anymore, and we're just going to let it happen, and whatever happens, we'll react to it. See, remember when the Sputnik went up?
Yes.
And suddenly this country said, whoa, what's going on here? And immediately we had a response to it. Now, when the Chinese put somebody on the moon, you wait to hear these guys start to talk about.
Well, wait, we got there first, so we own it.
Leadership.
We own the moon. We got there first. They have to pay us rent when they land there.
Yeah,
that's how monopoly works. All right, Congressman, thanks for coming on, and
okay.
We'll see what happens.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Congressman Jim McDermott, who I think he seemed to reassure us that we don't have to stock up on the packaged tuna fish for August 2nd.